the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, will be joining the high-level meetings on Syria and ASTANA on the 3rd and 4th of this month in view of the urgency and importance of re-establishing a de-escalation of the situation in Syria and moving on confidence-building measures. He has agreed to attend the meeting as an observer at the invitation of the Kazakh government. While in Astana, the Special Envoy will be supporting the efforts by the guarantors of the ceasefire and other participants to de-escalate the military situation. He will be accompanied by a technical delegation of UN experts who have been present at the previous Astana meetings. Mr. de Mistura will also use the opportunity to conduct political consultations with the ceasefire guarantors and others that will be present. This will be particularly timely as he is at present putting finishing touches on his deliberations regarding the next round of intra-Syrian talks that will be held in Geneva. And the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mustafa Akinci, and the Greek Cypriot leader, Nikos Anastasiadis, met today at the UN Good Offices under the auspices of the Secretary General Special Advisor Espen Barth Eide to continue their Cyprus talks. There was a good discussion between the sides on several outstanding issues, even if several differences remain. The leaders have scheduled 2 more meetings to be held in the next 2 weeks on the 11th and 17th of May. We hope that they will do their utmost to move the process forward decisively in the crucial weeks ahead. For his part, Mr. Eide will be in New York towards the end of this week to update the Secretary General on the latest developments in the peace talks and on the way forward. And in a new report by the Secretary General on the impact of armed conflict on children in the Philippines, he says there have been significant progress on the protection of boys and girls in spite of continued violations, particularly in Mindanao. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front has made progress in implementing an action plan to put an end and prevent the recruitment and use of children, culminating with the identification and formal disengagement of over 1,800 children. For its part, the government has also strengthened the national framework to address violations against children, and the report is online on the website of the Office of the Children in Armed Conflict. And our colleagues from the World Food Programme said today that despite tremendous needs, the Central African Republic counts among the world's most forgotten crises and receives ever-shrinking humanitarian funding. Half of the country's people require humanitarian assistance, and more than 2 million are hungry. WFP's response plan for 2017 is only 7% funded. Insufficient funding has forced the agency to cut food rations in half that are distributed to the most vulnerable Central African families. For many, it's the only thing they have to eat. WFP immediately requires $12.5 million through October 2017 to meet the most urgent needs of extremely vulnerable people. And the number of children who are or will be acutely malnourished in Somalia has shot up by 50% since the start of this year to 1.4 million, according to UNICEF. It said today that more than 275,000 children either have or will suffer life-threatening severe acute malnutrition this year. UNICEF says that severely malnourished children are 9 times more likely to die of diseases such as cholera and measles, which are spreading. More information online. And an update on the activities of Judge Othman, the eminent person that the Secretary General named in conjunction of the investigation into the tragic deaths of Dag Hammarskjold and the members of the party accompanying him. The Secretary General reaffirms his own commitment to this matter in the strongest terms, as he feels that he owes it to his illustrious and distinguished predecessor, Dag Hammarskjold, and to the other members of the party accompanying him and their families to pursue the full truth of this matter. Judge Othman had held meetings in New York last week with member states, looking into the investigation to the death of Dag Hammarskjold and the members of the party accompanying him. Mr. Othman continues to urge member states to identify and make available possible further information that may shed light on the final stages of Flight SEBDY, the aircraft that carried Dag Hammarskjold and his party, and that crashed near Ndola on the night of the 17th to 18th of September 1961. Mr. Othman noted that more active cooperation is necessary for member states to declassify or otherwise allow access to records that are over 55 years old. The current stage of the work will build on the findings of the 2015 panel, which concluded, among other things, that there was significant new information with sufficient probative value to further pursue aerial attack or other interference as a hypothesis for the possible cause of the crash. Mr. Othman will continue to liaise with relevant parties prior to reporting his findings to the Secretary General and the General Assembly before the end of the current session. And tomorrow is World Press Freedom Day. I'm getting to that. World Press Freedom Day, and the Secretary General, a message we issued today, says that journalists go to the most dangerous places to give voice to the voiceless. He notes that media workers suffer character assassination, sexual assault, detention, injuries, and even death. The Secretary General stresses the need for leaders to defend a free media, saying that this is crucial to counter prevailing misinformation. He also calls for an end to all crackdown against journalists because a free press advances peace and justice for all. For her part, the Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, said that journalists face a crisis of audience identity and stand before a horizon where all challenges are emerging with new threats. The concept of post-truth and fake news point to rising questions that go to the heart of a free, independent, and professional journalists. And on Thursday, UNESCO and DPI will hold a high-level panel discussion on the freedom of expression, peace, and inclusiveness, and that will take place in Conference Room 2 at 10 a.m., and I assume you're all invited. And as Maggie said, today is also World Tuna Day. Snicker all you want. But in many countries, particularly small island developing states, depend heavily on tuna resources for food security and nutrition, economic development, employment, government revenue, and livelihoods. At present, more than 80 countries have tuna fisheries, and thousands of tuna fishing vessels operate in all oceans, making trade in tuna a significant contributor to the global economy. However, increasing threats resulting from human activities, such as overfishing and the impact of climate change and ocean acidification, as highlighted in the first global integrated marine assessment, adversely impact the conservation and sustainable use of tuna stocks. I'm happier when you're in the skybox. So on this very first celebration of World Tuna Day, we strongly urge all stakeholders to make every effort for the long-term conservation and sustainable use of resources, which is important in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In this regard, we wish to emphasize the critical importance of effectively implementing international legal framework as reflected in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which has been strengthened by the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement, recommendations from its review conference, and General Assembly resolutions. The Ocean Conference next month will provide a valuable opportunity for states and all other stakeholders to support implementation of Target 14 of the 2030 Agenda, and at this opportune moment, let us all commit to protecting our precious tuna resources and their surrounding ecosystems and using these resources sustainably for generations to come. And on that note, just want to flag that Mr. Takasu, the head of the Department of Management, will be here tomorrow to brief you on the financial situation of these United Nations. Maggie.
Thanks, Steph. So the Secretary General, big proponent of conflict prevention. What is he doing to prevent the situation in Venezuela spiraling out of control and into something more tragic?
As we said, I think the Secretary General has been following the situation very closely. I think he has been, over the last week and recently, on the phone with the mediators who are involved, as well as the Holy See, to discuss the situation in the country and obviously see what can be done.
Considered appointing some sort of special envoy, or is there anything in the works for that?
I will leave it at that for the moment. Yep. Go ahead.
on Venezuela. Yesterday, the president of Venezuela said that he wants to redo the constitution of Venezuela, which is being deemed by the opposition as a move to try to stop the elections, which should be happening next year, and another move to stay in power longer. How the United Nations see these type of moves, especially now that we know that Leopoldo Lopez has been in jail for over 4 years, and we have the mayor of Caracas taken, as well as the mayor of Táchira, and we still see protests daily with more than 25 people dead.
I think what's obviously the violence is something that we've seen, and that's something that is worrying. And I think at this point it's also important for the government and the opposition to engage sincerely, to reactivate an open dialogue effort, and to see what concrete gestures from all parties can create sort of the necessary conditions so everyone can unite and address the country's challenges. Michelle?
Just another follow-up. Does the Secretary-General see any role in Venezuela for some of the UN agencies to help out with regard to aid of some sort?
You know, obviously the UN is present through its country office. We can get you some more details of what exactly they're doing on the development and humanitarian front. Mr. Avni, maybe we'll switch tacks. Maybe not. You never know.
Speaking of conflict prevention, so the Secretary General has in the past said on several occasions that there is a strong connection between the Jews and Jerusalem. Today, UNESCO voted to basically erase such a connection. Does he have anything to say about that?
You know, we've seen the vote that took place in UNESCO. I think there is no question as to the importance of the old city of Jerusalem as a holy site for the three religions, the Jewish religions, Islam, and Christianity, and about the importance of the religious and historical links that the city has to those religions. I think any undertaking perceived to repudiate the undeniable common reverence for these sites would not be in the interest of peace and only feed violence and radicalism. As for there are a number of final status issues, and those issues should be resolved through direct negotiations by the parties.
Following up, we didn't hear the question about it. I think the resolution.
Well, you're asking for our point of view. Right. Is that in our point of view, there maybe the tone of my delivery was not correct. There is no question.
Does it mean that UNESCO is politicized by this resolution?
The member states that make up UNESCO are free, and it is their responsibility to take whatever actions they feel they need to take. I'm asked for the Secretary General's position. It's not for me to analyze whether UNESCO has been politicized or not. They took the vote. The Executive Committee of UNESCO took the vote. It did today. My understanding is then goes to the general membership later this week.
I have another question regarding the prisoners in Israel. 15,000 of them are in their 16th day of hunger strike. What is Mr. Mladenov doing in order to alleviate this suffering, which is jeopardizing the lives of many of these prisoners?
The issue of the current hunger strike being taken by a number of Palestinians in Israeli jail is one, obviously, that Mr. Mladenov and his team are following, but in which our colleagues on the Office of Human Rights are in the lead, and they have repeatedly called on Israel to end the practice of administrative detention, and also to ensure that all detainees, the treatment of all detainees, must be consistent with international law.
In Bahrain, the protesters have been protecting the house of the senior cleric there for 9 months, literally standing in the streets, picketing there for 9 months, and you know how hot the weather is there. Is there anything the United Nations can do or say in order to stop the threat to Sheikh Isa's safety, and they want to take him to prison as a result?
Let me look into it. I don't have anything on Bahrain for you today. Yes, Matthew.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, in South Sudan, the SPLA in opposition is claiming that UNMISS airlifted some government soldiers out while they were in the middle of, they say, attacking Dinkas, and so they're questioning the impartiality. But also, I just wanted to get from you, has UNMISS moved SPLA soldiers, and if so, why? They also say more generally that the UNMISS is not investigating the actions of its own peacekeepers that may harm people.
I don't really understand that last part. I think UNMISS through if you look at what the mission has done through the Camet report and others, I think we've been as transparent as possible into the activities and the work of the peacekeepers and flagging the issues that may arise when they have. On your first question, we're aware, I've seen the reports, and we're looking into it currently.
Okay, I have
Go ahead.
On this issue of the UN investigating itself. I wanted to know whether you have anything on an event that took place in the DRC in North Kivu near Rutshuru on April 28th, said that MONUSCO peacekeepers, confronted by protesters, fired some 11 warning shots, resulting in 6 civilians being injured. So this is the SRSG brief in DRC. How does, number one, what's the rules of engagement? How can 11 warning shots result in 6 civilians being shot?
I can see if we can get anything on it. I have not seen the reports. You can also, I think on these detailed things, you can also
I think shooting civilians is not just a detail.
What I'm saying to you is that you're also free to call the press people at the mission, and they probably give you information faster than I can.
But I'm asking,
Maggie,
I'd like to know.
I'll go back to you.
Steph, you said recently that there'd be a decision coming soon on compensation and an apology to the Roma in Kosovo on the lead poisoning issue. Do you have any update on that?
No. These are. Oh, sorry, Iftikhar, you've been very patient. And Masood, you've also been very patient.
This question has been asked before a couple of times, and you promised to get back. Determined what led to the expulsion of UNDP boss in Tanzania? The exact reason?
No. I'd love to be able to answer your questions. I don't have anything for you on that.
Okay.
Masood.
Stefan, on this issue of Israeli detention of children, Palestinian children, continued detention of Palestinian children, I've been asking this question earlier, and that in view of the Amnesty report that there have been instances of torture of the children and so forth. So does the United Nations have anything to say? Have they had any conversations with the Palestinian?
I think this is an issue that our human rights colleagues have looked into and have been in touch with the Israeli authorities on. Carol and then Evelyn.
Stefan, there was a meeting today between the Libyan Prime Minister and General Haftar, given the UN calls for more inclusivity. Do you have any information on whether there was any progress towards that?
Let me see what I can get you after briefing. Evelyn.
Thank you, Steph. To follow up on Carol's question yesterday, is there an ETA for the naming of a prosecutor for the General Assembly? Resolutions on Syria.
Oh, you mean the accountability? No, I can't give you a hard date, but that is something that is very much in progress.
Staying on the accountability in Syria, Khan Sheikhoun incident happened a few weeks ago, and the Syrian government has always encouraged the OPCW to come forward and investigate that on the ground, especially in Shairat air base, which was bombarded. Why are they reluctant to do that? Why is the OPCW reluctant to send someone, or the United Nations, or both, to send a delegation or investigation team on that?
Those initial steps need to be taken by the OPCW, and that's a question you should address to them.
Okay, another thing about Yemen. Has there been any progress with regarding to alleviating the suffering of the people of Yemen, the hunger or the starvation risk after this conference, which was last week?
The short answer is is that the suffering of the people of Yemen continues. We were able to get, I think, quite a large sum of money from donors to help with the humanitarian aid. We continue to face access issues, and we continue to operate in an environment that remains an active conflict zone. So until the parties, the people who have their hands on the trigger, stop pulling the trigger, the suffering of the people of Yemen will continue. The work of our special envoy continues in trying to bring the parties back to the table and put a halt to the fighting.
How is the freight coming to Hodeidah? Is there any progress and is this mechanism joint mechanism?
I don't have anything for you on that. Benny, and then Matthew.
Another question on Hamas. They have a new document saying that you know there could be a Palestinian state in the 67 lines, but they still don't recognize Israel as a state, its right to exist, and so on and so forth. Does the UN in Gaza and UNSO see this document as any change in the Hamas point of view, or is it progress? Is it backwards, or what?
I would just say that we've taken note of the release by Hamas of this new document. We remain concerned about issues of persisting intra-Palestinian divisions as one of the continued obstacles to a comprehensive resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Masood, then Matthew.
Thank you. Stefan, on this situation which you realize that we have been asking about in India and Pakistan, the border situation is again escalating, given the clashes between the armies of the both countries. When is the Secretary General going to pay attention to this issue in the Kashmir dispute? Which
I think the Secretary General is paying attention to this issue. We checked with our colleagues at UNMOGIP, who had not yet received any alleged ceasefire violations reports from the Indian authorities related to the latest incident that we saw yesterday. We continue to reiterate the need for the parties to find a peaceful solution through engagement and dialogue.
UNMOGIP, as you know, UNMOGIP only speaks about what is happening on the Pakistan side because India refuses to allow UNMOGIP to operate on the Indian side. So it is not impartial.
We're fully, I think UNMOGIP is impartial. We're fully aware of the operational environment in which UNMOGIP is forced to work. Stili.
Sure. Yesterday I'd asked you about the Friday stakeout by Frente Polisario and why it was not placed on the website. You said you'd look into it. It's still not there.
We're continuing to look into it.
No, but since the exact same thing happened,
I understand the situation, and when I have something new to share with you, I will share with you.
I guess, can you say, was it determined last time that it does, in fact, go up, even if only annexed to a member state's?
I'm saying to you the situation is being worked on. When I have something when a resolution has been found, I will share that with you.
Right. Okay. All right. I wanted to ask you about the CEB and then something about Cameroon. In the CEB, first of all, is there a public readout of any kind about the topics that were discussed there?
No, not more than to say that it was obviously it was important. This was Secretary General Antonio Guterres' first chance to meet with CB members as Secretary General. It was very much focused on issues of UN coordination and how the UN system can work better and more efficient ways.
I guess I wanted to ask, since the staff union, I guess, is more transparent, they've actually put forward a list of issues that they say they were working on, and there's two of them I want to ask you about. One is mitigating the impact on staff from administrative offshoring. So I asked you before, is there in fact a plan to move finance and other functions from headquarters in let's say New York, offshore? And if so, what is the plan?
Listen, I'm not sure what the plan is. I don't really understand what offshoring means when we're talking about an organization that is made up of 193 member states.
Except you say, well, if the jobs are here and you move them elsewhere, that's what that's their word.
All right.
Right? Okay, and would the people here be told to move elsewhere, or would they be
when details are being worked out, they will be shared with the staff.
And I wanted to ask you, there's also this one was kind of interesting. It said cooling off period for diplomats before joining the UN. Does the Secretariat have any position on the idea that to go directly from the Fifth Committee, for example, to work for DPKO or for the budget might be problematic, and what is the proposed reform, if there is one?
I have nothing for you on that. Thank you.